Logan, first to sort of situate everyone, maybe you could tell us like at this point in time, like tell us about your company, like size, location, that stuff.
Yeah, I own 5,123 multifamily units. Started in 2013. It's also own the property management company as well as the construction company. The construction company is mostly based on rehab, and we specialize in buying like 1970s to 2010 vintage multifamily and then rehabbing it. So we do about 100 to 150 turns, full rehabs per month. We've been doing that for over 3+ years, and we'll spend about 18.5 million in capex this year. We've got 150 employees as well.
So a lot of that is going to come back to allotment. But I want everyone in kind of thinking about appreciating the rest of this talk. I think one crucial thing to note is that Logan does not have investors in these properties. It's his equity, and he owns the management company. And as you'll see, I think one of the problems in real estate is often that those two things are bifurcated, and it creates some really interesting and painful incentive misalignments. And I think one of the things to keep in mind as Logan talks about this is the extent to which the fact that he owns both creates alignment and allows him to do a lot of what we're going to talk about. So let's briefly talk about how you got to own 5,100 units.
Yeah. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. All my properties, except for one now, is in Ohio. We're expanding outside of state. But I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, 3,500 people. And so my mom was a teacher. My dad worked in a factory. We didn't have any money. We didn't know anybody in real estate. So not a lot of people to reach out to. So what school taught me and society taught me is, you go to college, then you get a job working for corporate America. And that's exactly what I did. But I got lucky. I started working at Target Corporation, and I started as an assistant manager. One thing I've always excelled at was leadership in sports and in school. And over the course of about a decade at Target, I worked my way up through 6 different promotions, led 19,000 people, was in charge of $3.5 billion worth of sales. I had operations like enterprise-wide at one point. It was a really cool 10 years. And that first decade of my business career, I would say was the decade I got to learn the most, because you learn how to fire people, you learn how to hire people, develop, train. One thing I was fairly successful at was operations and systems and how to drive a P&L through that, which translated into real estate. So my next decade, I started real estate in 2013. My wife and I saved up for 2 years to buy our first single family home. And she's here today. And, we had plenty of nights eating ramen and peanut butter and jelly. Like we literally budgeted for those 2 years to be able to buy that first house. And I underwrote it by reading books. And it didn't make a lot of money, but it did make what I underwrote it for. And I self-managed that. Next year, I bought a duplex. The year after that, I bought 2 duplexes, all with our own money, keeping 100% of the equity. And so really slow start. I was just, 7 units in 3 years. But I started to learn that these weren't properties, these were businesses, right? With operating income and operating expenses. And if you apply systems, you can figure out how to drive value. And if you can extrapolate that value, obviously, you could be able to buy more. And from 2013 to 2019, I grew that portfolio to 252 units. Now I'm making quite a bit of money still at my W-2 job, high 6 figures. And we still lived on a budget, so I could apply and just drive as much as I can into the real estate, still owning 100%. And I read a lot of personal finance books, and all of them talk about ROI. But then I read one based on ROT, which is return on time. And it's not what you make, it's what you keep. So I was working 70 hours a week, nights and weekends, flying across the United States in my W-2 job. Of my 252 units, which was third-party managed at the time, from 7 to 252 was third-party. I was only working like 5 hours a week, right? Asset managing the property management company. But it was making as much as my W-2 was paying. So I quit and I started a property management company. We started with 4 employees, none of them with real estate or construction background. And we started ripping apart all the systems and rebuilding them the way that we want. And I know we'll talk about that though.
Yeah, I want to. So a couple of things I want to emphasize about the story up to this point. I think that a lot of what we're going to talk about in terms of how you run your operations likely comes out of that Target training. It's I never worked at a big company, but my impression is that there is a extreme focus. You're managing that many people and that many locations. There has to be an extreme focus on metrics and accountability and predictable processes, et cetera. And as we'll see, that's something that you've sort of taken into the real estate business. But I want to start with what you said about hiring, because when we were talking about this before this talk, you talked about hiring aggressively ahead of where you were in terms of the size of your business. So maybe talk for a moment about that management team that you hired in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, they came from all different areas. Some of them retail, but grocery stores. One of them was a leader at a restaurant. But I brought in different perspectives, and what they all had was the ability to have a growth mindset, great attitude, a work ethic, and I knew that they worked in high-paced environments like property management. Right? There's a lot that happens, and you just got to be able to adapt. And that's kind of what I surrounded myself with. And still today, over 150 employees, 90% of them didn't come from real estate, property management, or construction. So we've worked hard on building like a tech school type training atmosphere where we can bring people in and train them on our processes, which are, pretty unique and different than the industry. And
Yeah.
to relearn.
And I want to get into that because I think in hearing your story, one of the things that I think is so interesting about it is, I think because you it sounds like to a greater extent your team did not come up in the real estate business, I think that your expectations in terms about what's possible in terms of, for example, speed, are just wildly different than what if you just like. For me, we hired a contractor to renovate units, and Los Angeles is notoriously terrible with the bureaucracy, but it took months to turn units, and you guys turn units in
72 hours.
Okay. Okay. So I want to talk now about like what combination. Obviously, we talk about some people, but I want to talk about like how one gets to be able to turn a unit in 72 hours. Like what goes into.
Yeah, and I'll back up just a quick second. This is important. About 9 months, 12 months into starting the property management company, because it was in 2019, COVID happened, right? In March of 2020. So, one of the things that we found out right away is that our systems were holding up while everybody else was freaking out. Like if you're in real estate during COVID, you had the eviction moratoriums, you could barely go into units, cleaning common areas. And we're doing a really good job. We were still collecting rent. So we weren't afraid. And I noticed that a ton of people were getting laid off, like great people in the industry, great leaders. And so I hired them ahead of need. So I brought on this good talent and actually drove my company into the red for that year. But it allowed me to be able to scale. And, so at this time, 9 months into it, I have 360 units. I've hired all this talent and drove the property management company into the red. So there's only one thing to do is to acquire units. So that year, it took me 7 years to acquire 360 units. That year, I bought 427, the year of COVID. And then the year after that, 550, and I've been buying over 1,000 plus every year since. And I mentioned that because properties were like 10, 20, 30 cents on the dollar during COVID. I was buying $10 million properties that should have been, 15 to 18 million. And plus they were value add, so I could reposition them really quickly. And to get to the 72-hour turns, I started realizing, right, well, I'm buying all these value add properties. They need to be repositioned. They need to be rehabbed. There hasn't been investments made since 1970. And I realized that once I was done with my first one and I took out like $3 million tax-free, you own all the equity, that's a lot of money coming to you in one paycheck. The debt was 5%, but when I refied it, dropped down to 3.75. My debt was about the same. The cash flow was about the same. So I'm literally taking out big chunks of money while rates are dropping, right? So I'm like, I gotta do this faster. Like I know rates won't stay this small for this long. So I started looking at every process we had, and I went to my construction director, who came from grocery store, by the way, and I said, hey, like we're doing turns 45 days. Can we do them in a week? Like let's rip this standard operating procedure apart and let's just figure out how we do it in a week. And he goes, well, why can't we do it in 3 days? Why don't we just go overnight? And today we have cleaners and painters overnight. How we did that, there's a step-by-step process, of course, but there's just different things. Like, for example, we use Lowe's Corporation for a bunch of our materials. And instead of going there and negotiating price, I knew that we wanted speed. I mean, money loves speed. So we negotiated, how about you pick every single item that we need for our rehabs? And we only have 4 types of rehabs for like a car wash. We have the platinum package, the gold package, the elite package, and the silver package. So they're all the same. And the gold package I know has 242 DPCIs items. I said, I want you to pick them all. I want you to pallet them all. I want you to hold them in your back room, and I want you to deliver them to our units. Like, I'm not negotiating price with you. I want logistics.
Can I just, I want to step because this is like incredibly important. When we do a rehab, we're sending someone out to buy whatever it is, 10 towel bars, or 10 toilets or whatever. And then they're coming, the 10 toilets get delivered, and then someone has to break down that break down the pallet, carry the toilet to unit 1, carry the toilet to unit 2. So what you're doing is having all of the material for each unit palletized so that there's a pallet for unit 1, a pallet for unit 2, a pallet for unit 3, and they're holding them in their own warehouse until you're ready to rehab unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, right?
Exactly. No holding costs. They're holding it. They're delivering it. They're picking everything. So the amount of labor, right, that we've saved with that process, that procurement process, was really significant, and especially because they get delivered right to our unit. And then we just structured our rehabs, right? Like we looked at what do we need to do, and multifamily is not that complicated. You're rehabbing boxes, right? For example, none of us knew how to put in LVP the right way. Well, it's not that hard to figure out, right? You hire the 3 best people that put in flooring in your area, and then you YouTube, and you take notes. You pay them extra money so you can watch them, and you collaborate as a team. Is what is the best way to put in a luxury vinyl plank? What is the best way to demo out that old shade carpet in the 1970s building? And you write down that best practice, and then you time it. So then there's time goals as well too. And then you create a crew. At our company, like I said, we're much higher volume now, doing 100 to 150 rehabs. I'm repositioning 1,100 units at the same time right now to give you perspective. But we have 1 construction director, we have 2 construction leaders, and we have 22 rehab teams. The rehab teams are a crew captain, a rental tech 2, and a rental tech 1. We can hire a rental tech 1 with no experience. We can put them through our training, right? Because a rental tech 1, they do trailer, they demo, and they put in LVP floor, maybe some painting. Any one of you in here, I can teach you how to do that in less than 2 days. Like, right? It's relatively easy. And if they do a really good job, part of our standard operating procedure is we're trying to align values. And in the construction industry, people like to jump jobs, but not if they have somewhere to be able to go. So at our company, you can move from a rental tech 1 to a rental tech 2 if you do your job for 6 months consistently well and meet your time goals. And a rental tech 2, they're doing things like the bathroom, right? They're putting in toilets, a little bit more plumbing, maybe switching out the outlets. Most of it, we're not. And only 20% of the properties I buy, we're getting HO bonus, right? So we're doing mostly, brand new cabinets, countertops, bathrooms, etc. So we do quite a bit, but we're not going behind the walls 80% of the time. And you can train just about anybody to do that. And then the crew captain is kind of leading the team, right? He's on site and he's looking through that they got all the right materials, because Lowe's screws that up sometimes. Every vendor does. And the last thing we do, any great standard operating procedure that you have has a bonus structure or a scoreboard. And for us, when it comes to encouraging them to work fast and have high quality, we score on quality, we score on speed, and we score on cost. And we give 1 team bonus, which is really important, because the purpose of 1 team bonus is you can split up the percentages of the bonus. So the crew captain gets 50% of the bonus, rental tech 2 gets 30, and rental tech 1 gets the last 20. And why that's important is because if your rental tech 1 is taking 5 cigarette breaks, right, the crew captain and the other rental tech 2 is going to be pretty upset because they're potentially not going to meet their 72-hour goal. Quality we just measure on a 30-day basis in Wisconsin. The tenant has the opportunity to ask for any go-backs within 7 days. So if we have any go-backs within 7 days, they automatically lose 33% of their bonus. So our quality is 98.5%. Every 100 tenant that moves in, only 1.5 call us back to fix something. And it's not just about like the cost of fixing something, Moses. It's we're spending $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 per unit. Most of the teams are employees. We can do it, at a pretty good cost. We want the resident to be wowed when they walk in. So that's the quality factor.
I want to just break in here and say, maybe some of you have seen there are economists who do productivity analyses across the economy. And like one of the most surprising and persistent findings is that there's basically been no improvement in construction productivity. Like every other industry has had productivity improvements. And so except construction. And there's a bunch of questions about like why it is that this persists, this problem, or it can't get better at doing construction. And the hypothesis is that most construction is done by these like really undercapitalized small GCs that are like hiring day laborers. They've worked for a while. There's no training. There's no follow up. There's no nothing. And so basically, there's no improvement. And so what Logan's talking about here, when I heard this story first, it was like, oh, what's really going on here is that by investing in the system and then measurements and bonuses, what you're doing is actually driving markedly improved productivity into these construction teams and seeing the results in terms of making the construction go faster.
Yeah, it's we had to do it out of necessity because it was all my own capital. So the only way to receive my capital was to hit a refi event or increase the cash flow of the asset that I had. So spending a ton of times on systems obviously increases the profitability. I always tell people like, you don't need to look at the next deal. Sometimes it's a deal that you have is where you should spend your time. A lot of people ask about how you scale with your own money to over 5,000 units. Well, it's I can take a 100-unit apartment complex and I can literally rehab every inch of that thing at 9 months when it takes everybody else 4 years. If you compress time and you increase the speed of every one of your processes, what you do, there's a lot of money to be made.
I want to go back to this incentive alignment thing. When we have done rehab projects, we're pretty smart about it. I mean, we get things quoted before we look contingencies, but fundamentally we are hiring a GC, and yeah, we have some control in terms of the payment timing and everything. And we put a bonus and a penalty clause into the construction agreement, but fundamentally there is a major misalignment between us, the owner, and the GC. Like I can't tell you how many times. We literally had because the GC just decided that he should take some of that money we had paid him and go put it into someone else's project that was running behind. And that delayed one of our projects by like 3 months. And we're yelling at him every day, but it doesn't matter because fundamentally his interests and ours are misaligned. And so what you're doing is you own the construction company and the management company and the buildings. So you're kind of in a position to actually make things happen that need to happen quickly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then to your point, just incentivizing, we have monthly bonuses, and we just do it in every area of our company as well too. So we want interest to be aligned in everything we do. If you're a service tech, you get bonus as well too, based on the unit count that you're able to service and quality and then cost that you're doing it with, as well as the speed. So just integrating that throughout the company helps drive the right behaviors. I think incentives are really powerful if they're done right.
Yeah, I think I want to hit that because you said something upstairs that I thought was really impactful, which was I think you said that everyone in the company basically has like 3 things, is it, that they're responsible for, and those things do not overlap with anyone else's responsibilities, right? So that it's very clear who's responsible when something goes wrong. Or
yeah, no shared accountability. It's the number one productivity killer is when a single task is shared by multiple people, because then you don't really know whose fault it is. So, and then another productivity killer is when you give somebody 27 different tasks to do, and they have no idea, right? Because they're an employee, maybe they just started, or maybe they've been working there for a year. It's hard for them to prioritize. So by picking 3 most important items, and we don't just measure them, guys. Like, we have scoreboards on every single TV in every single room of our headquarters office. We have a report that is sent to everybody's phone every single day. I want everybody, no matter what business work stream they're working in my company, to know every minute of every single day exactly where they stand, metrically, but also ranked. We have 15 service techs. So Tony, I'm guessing, is going to be the number 1 service tech this week. Here's our best service tech. But maybe Carl is last. And I remember when I rolled this out, my HR had a problem with it right away. She's saying, Carl's going to see that he's last, and everybody else is going to see that Carl's last. She's like, that's disengaging. Like, that's going to drive bad culture behaviors. I said, nope. It's going to drive the right behaviors, because Carl's going to be faced with 2 things he's going to do. I know what you're thinking. He's going to quit, right? That's okay. He's currently last, HR. No, right? Other thing that he could do, he could call Tony and he could be like, dude, you're hitting your bonus every single month. You're the number one person. Everybody sees you. We have traveling trophies. You got to make it fun. We even got our 22 rental tech teams. I didn't say this before too. They all have teams. Team B sticks. They make the names. They make the team names. It always wins quality. Anyway, you want to have fun with it, but you want to be transparent, right? I want people in my company that want to achieve more, become more, earn more, take on more responsibility. We're scaling. And people like that want to know where they're ranked, right? They want to know how to get to that next level.
I want to hit on one more area, and then I want to open it up to Q&A. So one of the, I think, major questions people have about you is obviously how did you, without picking on investors, how did you grow so quickly? And I think if you're not going to raise outside equity, you're going to rely to a large extent on debt. And the way that when we sort of started talking about how you relate to your lenders, it was radically different than anything certainly that we do and anything that I'm aware of any other private real estate company doing. Maybe Matthew does it at his scale, but I've never heard of anyone else doing this kind of stuff. So maybe let's talk about first your sort of annual report process that you use with your lenders.
Yeah, I've been doing this since I started, just because to get a bank to give me money. You know, I started owning 100% equity by accident because I had nobody to ask for money. At the time I knew enough, I didn't want to give up any equity because I felt like the hardest part was what I've already learned with the operations. But my banks have always been the best partner, Moses, because I sit down in front of them every single year and I meet with all of my lenders. I also pick 5 or 6 new ones, and I basically prepare an annual report. Like it's really, really detailed. This year's was 82 pages.
It looks like a public company annual report. I'm not exaggerating. It's like a designer has made, and it includes like your scheduled real estate, and I think does it have your PFS in there as well?
PFS, global real estate summary. It also has every single property I've ever owned, including the first single family I bought, how it performed every single year. You know, I'm not being perfect, but what I really love is I can sit in front of the lender and be like, here is everything. Let me talk to you about mistakes I've made. Let me talk about the properties that went well. Let me tell you about the plan and how I turned it around if I did make a mistake. It's all right there. I mean, I literally every single year update how each property performs so I can tell a story. And the story is that I'm always going to be transparent with you as my partner, and I want you to know how these properties are performing. And early on, I needed to do that, right? Because I needed to build a relationship with them so that they would be able to lend me as much money as possible to get into these deals. So I got really good at also updating them after this annual report, which, by the way, I can share the table of contents or whatever if somebody wants.
Before we get into, I do definitely want to talk about this process by which you keep them abreast of ongoing processes or ongoing projects, but I just want to emphasize how different this is than at least what we do. And I don't, maybe some of you are sitting out there and going like, no shit, you idiot. And it's not revolutionary to you, but it certainly is to me. We here in Los Angeles just tend to treat our lenders like they are selling a commodity product. And it's just like, look, you get a loan broker, they go get you a bunch of quotes, you figure out whatever quote is best, you sign with them. I've literally never met any of the lenders. And we owe $100 million, and we're tiny at one level. We've done a lot of loans, and we've never met anyone. We've never had anyone come and ask us about what is the vision for the company, even though our deals look the same every time. Like there clearly is something that's going on that could replicate it over and over again, and no one has taken the time to come to ask us. And I always kind of thought that was weird. But what Logan is doing is, which is what we should have done, is proactively going to them and saying, here is what my vision is, and here is how we're doing against that vision, and getting them to buy in and treating them like partners instead of like providers of a commodity.
Yeah, I think there's one thing to send a lender a business plan, and then it's another to present that business plan. I think that goes a long way. And, you know, you can start the presentation with your story, then obviously you back it up with the financials, your PFS, your global real estate summary. But then I think after that is like just how you've operated these assets. Like a big part of mine is just like, someone's lending you a lot of money. They probably want to know how you can protect that money. So by adding in different things that they're looking at, if you've been in real estate for a few years, you know exactly what the underwriters are looking at. So like preparing how you drive those metrics goes a really long ways. And then right after that, so if a lender does a deal with me, they get a 2-week update, then they get a 30-day update, a 60-day update, and a 90-day update. And then every quarter after that, until it's repositioned. So usually for 3 quarters after that, because really.
And let me just jump in again. It's like, for us, the task of financial reporting to lenders is like, it's painful. It's like it's like a bot. We do whatever the minimum the bank requires is what we do, because we prefer to be focused on other stuff, and it's annoying and whatever. And we don't spend a lot of time thinking about the format. It's like whatever the format that they requested is, we quickly fill it in and make sure the numbers are right, etc. And what you're doing is not that. You are proactively giving them much more information than they would even necessarily request.
Yeah, I like to just drive it down their throat how well I'm doing with this asset that they finance. And I like to remind them of that as much as possible. Because I was telling Moses this, for me, after I've done that first deal with the lender, I have only one goal after that, after I've over-delivered. And it's how fast can I get to their legal lending limit? Because every deal after the first shouldn't be easier if you live up and you deliver and you show them the stats along the ways. So, that relationship's really, really important. And it has been for my career to be able to scale like I have. And transparently, obviously during COVID, and if you know my story, I was very aggressive. And I think, you got to build a relationship if you want to get aggressive, especially on the way into the deal. And then as you accumulate more, obviously your goal is then to deleverage and be a little bit more risk averse. But depending on where you are in your real estate career, one thing's for sure the same is, take a little bit more time than you think. You can even assign it to somebody, right? Like your TA or your business manager, and they can put it together, and then you can look over it. But it doesn't take a lot. Like, what did you do with the property, right? They want to know, did you stick any CapEx into it? How is the NOI versus goal? Simple metrics like that. And I don't know, lenders love pictures. So a couple before and afters goes a long way.
No, I just, again, in comparison to whatever we send, which I think is often like just like a spreadsheet or something like that. And we just hope that they will understand, but really they're human beings. And in the same way that the equity partners want to know what's going on and see pictures, you're treating your debt the same way. And I think the result is that they're willing to be more aggressive with you on leverage. Okay, I want to. There's a ton more that we could talk about now, but I want to make sure that we're saving time for questions.
So about 30% of my portfolio, I'm right now actively working on moving to agency debt. It's a good time as rates are falling too. I've only honestly done 3 or 4 of those deals in the past, just because, to be transparent, it's all my own money, so I needed the capital, I needed the refi, and as you move it into non-recourse agency debt, it's just really hard to refi as opposed to local lenders and credit unions. Credit unions are great too, if you guys have those in your states. Those have been really good to me, but I have personally guaranteed the majority of my portfolio. We do really heavy due diligence ahead of time, and we'll look at, and we still do, sometimes there's just great deals out there that do need everything to be redone, from HVAC to plumbing to electrical. So we do that 20 to 25% of the time, but we are looking for, our bread and butter is finding the deal that was built really, really well, but has some age on it, and we can just blow out basically our favorite thing is when a builder built it and he was the only builder and he built it to manage. We found that they do a really good job with that, but for some reason they don't rehab the units for the last 50 years. So, we have an entire brand team that goes and does construction programming and new construction, so we'll, borrow those ideas. Because somebody asked me this last night, is like, how do you manage, what's the difference between managing an A-class apartment because you have 10% of those in a C-class? And my answer was nothing. Like, I grew up in C-class apartments, blue-collar, hardworking, and if you treat those residents, you answer the phone for them, you do the service request in 48 hours, you treat them like they're in a brand new construction building because that's the way they should be treated, they don't leave. Like our retention is really, really high. We couldn't get into experience today, but I just think property management, operating of assets, the bar is very low. I'll tell you, all my markets I got into in the beginning were next to Target stores. I had all the data, right? So if I'm being honest, that's how I started. And then I obviously follow, I really try to follow being able to, all my deals, I don't know if I mentioned this, are off market. So we're working really hard to buy these off market deals at a really good basis. I think I was just at the senior housing talk with Joe, and they get their deals at really good basis too. We have to, right? To rebuild in Wisconsin is about $180,000 a unit. So I'm typically buying deals, you know, if it's a really heavy value add, in $50,000 to $60,000 a unit, and if it's more, you know, stronger B class, newer product, maybe up to $100,000, and then we're putting in $20,000 to $40,000. So you know, we're all in typically between $100,000 to $125,000, and which is well below the replacement cost, and a really nice margin to be able to increase cash-on-cash returns, which can get up to 30+% on a typical deal after we're repositioning it. Other markets, like we just got into Madison. I wish I would have got it there sooner. I just couldn't find a deal. That market's like super tough to break into. So I have about 300-400 units in Madison. Milwaukee, people probably know Milwaukee. I have about 1,000 units actually around and in Milwaukee, and we just got in there in 2022. And then what most people don't know though is I'm in, you know, 25-ish other cities that aren't Madison and Milwaukee. These tertiary markets are growing just as fast. They just don't have the population growth to be on a report, to be in this room. And I love those markets. Last year I entered Ohio, and to answer your last question about like where do I see in the future, I have so many opportunities still in Wisconsin, so I'm going to take those first because that's where all our systems are built. But I envision our company one day going across, you know, the majority of the United States, but at least probably the red states. I'd just love to continue to build a company that I'm really proud of, and I think we have a lot more work to do to continue to increase the experience and the standards that we provide people that are living with us. And I think because the bar is so low, I want to prove that you can do it profitably, but you can also treat your residents really well. And I just think property management is ripe for disruption. Same with construction, and so that's kind of the goal, is how do we build a company that I'm proud of and our reputation is really strong and people just never want to leave our communities. Everyone keeps asking for a unit count goal. I mean, I don't have a unit count goal. I think over the next 9 years, I'll be over 25,000 units for sure, but I don't really care about units. We have scoreboards for everything, so I was telling Moses, it's really nice because a lot of these systems I obsessed over and worked really hard to build them where they are now, but now team members have helped iterate and move things along. So I think it's very easy to see where things aren't great, and I think 2 things we'd like to get a lot better at is, 1, being more seamless when we're rehabbing these units. You know, real people are living there, and because we're doing it in 9 to 12 months versus 4 years, as you can imagine, nobody really wants to live in a construction zone. But getting our rental techs and our construction team to, you know, work neat and clean and not throw all their shit in the common areas when other people are living there, you know, that's a big issue, right? Because those first 30% of renters that we're moving into these brand new, beautiful units are paying higher than market. And the last thing we want to do is turn them off for like the next year, because they're definitely not going to renew then too. So that's something we're working really hard at. And then honestly, we're working hard at doing a better job telling our story. You know, we do a lot when it comes to experience. It's like it's a whole. We use an analogy of like a dating experience at the company. Like I've been with my wife for 20 years, but I hear now you use Tinder and you swipe and stuff like that. So we want people to think about what does that experience look like and how good is it. If you're a leasing agent and you pick up the phone and someone's calling to rent and they're not going to see the unit, you got to get the date. We're not as good as like telling that story and putting ourselves in the shoes of like providing the great experience to be able to get that date. And then if we do get the date and they walk into that unit, we actually did something at the beginning of this year where we did 14 days, no questions asked, break your lease. We're going to guarantee you the quality of the unit is going to be what it is, because You know, just like if you put yourself as you have a six-pack and you show up for the day and you have a beer belly, like, that's not the kind of experience that we want. And quite honestly, if a tenant's upset within the first like week, you probably don't
You
want
don't want
them
them
there.
anyway.
Yeah.
You want them gone.
So we're working on different things with experience too. Well, we got a team looking 24/7. I incentivize really, really well. I've paid a police officer over $500,000 on one deal, and told him to tell all of his other police officers. I've paid pest management people. So I try to look at places where other people wouldn't look. Like if a building has a lot of pest issues, like the owner might not want it. So having an in to that would help. If there's a lot of crime, but the location is good, the owner might be sick of evicting people and the crime, and I'll take care of that problem for you. So by doing different things like that, I've never put a deal under contract and didn't close. So that's where people love to bring me the deal before they list it. Obviously, they might get a little bit more money on if they list it on the open market, which is fair, but they won't have the guarantee of close. So I think that matters. And then I've rarely, and only when the seller has literally lied, have retraded or asked for anything in inspections. So by building up a really strong reputation, I do find that I have, at least now, just a ton of deals that come my way. I think in real estate, we should never think of it as a transactional business. It's a relationship business. And what I've found is my competition thinks it's in the transaction. If we're gonna do a deal together, most likely you either have more real estate or you know people in real estate. And if I exceed all of your expectations, you're gonna do what? You're gonna tell everybody that you know. And that's what I've just tried to do, is how do I develop this relationship with you where if you have properties in the future, you're gonna sell them to me clearly, or your friends are gonna come to me. And I think we gotta think about things more in a win-win relationship type. As Sam Zell tells us too, he's like, he never takes the last dollar. And I think I'm certainly known for that too. If the deal works, I'm not gonna over-negotiate. Yeah, we do. Yep. We'll put on a different name because usually we want the reputation to change quickly. But our goal is that when we hand out the letters, and my management company is Focus Property Management, and when we hand out those letters, we want the people that are dealing drugs and to know that they're probably not going to be there much longer. Sometimes we'll do that with SWAT trucks too. But we also want the ones that want a safe environment, that want it well lit, that want the common areas to actually smell good and be clean, to know that it might cost a little bit more, but hopefully we're giving more value than taking. Yeah, my typical week today, I was telling this to Moses, if you spend all of your time creating the systems, measurables, and scoreboards, then it really doesn't take any more of your time. So I spend 1 to 2 days a week on strategic company things, or acquisitions, or developing the president of my property management company. I spend day 3 hunting and talking to and developing relationships for new deals. Day 4, I work with my wife on our foundation. And then about 1 day a week is the only day I won't do anything in the business. And for like 2 years running now, we've taken like a week of vacation every single month too. So it's possible to do that with great systems and great people. I think that wasn't always the case. I mean, grew up on a farm, and I understand working 70, 80-hour weeks. I did that at Target, and I did that to build my company. But like, instead of focusing on, I think where people get it wrong is they'll like hand off a process and they'll have somebody else like build the system. But there'll be no scoreboard, there'll be no checks and balances. So then all these things you hand off, you got this like feeling in your gut that it might not be being run the right way. So I try not to do that. I just try to spend all my time obsessing about making the system the best that's possible. Because I used to do delinquency, I used to do legal. I had to. We didn't have enough people, we didn't have enough money. It was all my own. But I was telling Moses, like, there still was a scoreboard. So when I put on the legal hat and I had to do delinquency, I knew the 3 metrics that mattered, and I knew that one day, if I write down my steps, if I record my steps, if I create a quiz, that the team member I put in there, I'm going to be pretty confident that they could do it at least 70% as good as me. And over time, they'll probably be at 110%. Like, my legal team laughs. They still look at my training video that I put together back in 2019, and it's pretty scary to what they do now. So are there good resources out there? No. Honestly, it's like really bad in the construction. But is there an easy way to do it? Yes. Like most of what you do, and no offense to construction, most of what construction do, there is complicated things, but there is things that are very, very simple. And even the most complicated things, it is you can pay somebody, you can find the 3 best people at doing that thing, and ask them if you can watch them or if they can train you. And then you can just you don't need to be super smart to take what are the steps I liked from those 3 best people, what are the ones I didn't, and then build your own. You obviously can use AI. You could literally type in ChatGPT, what is the best way to be putting in an LVP on an 800 square foot floor, and how long should it take? Because I think every single process should have a time goal, right? Some sort of measurable. So I would say that's what I would do, is I would just strip down whatever piece of in construction that you're trying to do, and I would strip it down and ask the best people in your industry or whatever, wherever you are in your region, watch them, build your own, and then very important is when you create that playbook, your team has to follow it. Like I see people put so much time on a system, and then they put their team in it, and the team's like, no, I have a better way of doing it. Not until you do mine for 6 months and you meet all the time requirements. Then you can iterate the playbook. But first, show me that you can do the best practice that I spent all the research doing, and then you can iterate from there. Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. So we don't kick anybody out unless they're a drug dealer, and they usually just abandon the unit. Well, when we go in there, the first thing that we do is in our welcome letter, we'll actually tell them, like, I don't know why we don't do this more, but we just are very transparent about what's gonna happen at this apartment community, how we're gonna rehab units, even what the units will look like, because again, we only do the 4 types, how we're gonna rehab the common areas, how we're putting on new roofs, and we spend a lot of time communicating that with them. And then we'll offer, so typically we'll have those first every unit mix, one of every, like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom done, and we'll hold those before we rent those, and we'll actually send out letters and we'll do tours. So we'll bring through on like a 100-unit apartment community, we'll try to bring through as many people as we can, and we'll even like have drinks in there and stuff like that, and we say, hey, this is what the new units are gonna look like. And then obviously we'll ask if they want to transfer at a discount. And that's awesome because if they do decide to transfer, it's going to be at a higher rent increase anyway. But the unit that they were in now that we can also rehab. So we're moving really quickly. One other thing that we do is in all of my contracts, once I waive all of due diligence, the seller cannot lease or renew any more leases. So I want to go into this this community with as many vacancies as possible. So typically I'm waiving all contingencies within 14 days on like a 60 or 90-day contract, which leaves a lot of time as tenants are moving out and units for us to be able to get into.
We have a ton more questions, but unfortunately we have to wrap it up. So Logan, that was amazing. Thank you so much.